Good evening. I'm just going to give everybody a couple of minutes as we have people signing in. You are here for the IDA Georgia seasonal chat with Janine Wiskind, which is so great. Going to be talking about occupational therapy. We are so lucky to have her. Um, I'll just get started by saying one or two things about IDA Georgia. First of all, greetings. IDA's mission is to create a future for all individuals who have struggled with dyslexia and other related reading differences so that they may have a richer, more robust life and access to the tools and resources that they need. So we do these seasonal chats, about once a season, and we try to pick topics that we think are going to be helpful to our audience. So feel free to email us and let us know what you're interested in. My name is Janet Street. I'm an Orton Gillingham Fellow, and I train teachers to use structured literacy through Smart Street Educational Consulting. And I'm also a member of the IDA Georgia Board, and I'm going to be your host tonight. Please know that you can submit questions via the chat or the Q&A that you see at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to address those at the end of the session. So without further ado, our guest tonight is Janine Wiskind. She is a pediatric occupational therapist who is the owner and creator of Body and Brain Parenting. In addition to her private practice, which is called On Solid Ground, she trains occupational, physical, and speech language therapists across the United States, and she is on a mission to bridge that gap between clinical understanding and everyday parenting. So we're so lucky to have you, Janine. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
being.
much. Thank you.
I'm going to dive in just starting at the top because it's kind of hard to know where to start because a lot of parents and teachers listening to this, they might understand the role of physical therapy, but not occupational therapy. They're not, kind of a lot of us are still kind of murky on exactly what occupational therapy is and how it's different from the other therapies. So maybe could you just start there?
Absolutely. And I know it's occupational is just kind of a more abstract choice of words for a profession. Speech therapy, it's clear they're doing talking, physical therapy is doing mobility. Occupational therapy encompasses a lot of different things. And the word occupation refers to what are the things that you as an individual need to and want to do in a day to be functional. And when we look at a child, their function is their activities of daily living. I can get up, eat, brush my teeth, get dressed, and do the things related to my body that I'm supposed to do. I can play and I can learn. Like those are the main encompasses of the occupations of a child. So it gets tricky because depending on the environment that the occupational therapist is in, we have very different roles. A school-based OT has much more, they're only allowed to stay within the structures of school. So they're looking at a child's handwriting and fine motor skills. Hopefully, if they're in an environment that allows for it, there's a lot of different changes and rules, but they can do more organization and coordination of the body. So there's definitely overlap between physical and occupational therapy as it relates to the child developing a sense of themselves and their strength and the ability to sit in a chair and have the coordination to use their body in PE and at recess. But the piece that really sets OT apart from those two professions are two big theories, one called sensory integration and primitive reflex integration. So when we think about our five senses, I can hear, smell, see, touch, taste. We take a lot of this for granted, but the brain is just amazingly brilliant, and it is constantly synthesizing and analyzing information from the world. As I'm talking to you, there may be things going on around you, and your brain knows, ignore that, magnify this. So in some children and adults, the synthesis of that sensory information isn't happening as naturally as it could, and it creates dysfunction rather than function. So OTs work on teaching a child's body to connect all those senses and understand how to to move and be within their world in a calm and regulated place. So how do we do that? A lot, we talked about the five senses. We have three additional senses that aren't like mainstream thinking. So proprioception. Proprioception means, where am I? I know where I am because I'm getting constant information from the different joints in my body to say, you are here. And we take that where I am for granted, but a lot of our little kids are so outside of their bodies, they're so disorganized that they don't really have a sense of where they are in space. This may look like a child who just doesn't use their body at all and is laying on you the whole time and doesn't want to hold themselves up at the dinner table and is lying on the floor to watch TV, is leaning on their, leaning on them because they can't feel their body. They're not getting a good sense of where they are, and they have to like use the world around them and it's just way too much effort because gravity just feels so heavy. Or it may look like the child that doesn't know how to keep still for 1 second because they are so disorganized. So that proprioceptive piece is so vital in like teaching a child, this is where I am. If we think about a pyramid, the sensory processing and this is where I am is at the base of the pyramid, which we need to fill in all those holes down here so that a child can go further up the pyramid, with the tip of the pyramid being, I'm confident about who I am. I'm connected to the world, so I know how to connect to the people around me. I can therefore sit in class and hold my body up and listen to the teacher and write down what I'm hearing and have organized all the motor and the visual and the auditory all at the same time. So I kind of digress a little. So the proprioceptive system supports a lot of that, but the vestibular system supports a lot of that too. The vestibular just means movement. So again, some of our kids, those two systems are very closely linked. And some children have very sensitive vestibular systems. They're the kids that like to just watch what's going on around them. Their friends are on the swings and on the playground, and they think it's a good idea to just watch and tell everyone what to do, but they're not going to engage in it. Or they're hiding behind their mom's leg, and mom's like, go play, it's so fun, it's so fun. And they're like, no, it looks terrifying. I don't even know where my body is in relation to that slide that I'm supposed to go down. Or the flip side, and anywhere in between, but the other extreme would be the child who thinks it's a great idea to jump from the top of the slide because they have no sense of the distance and how unsafe that experience is because they're just not connected to their bodies. So that is a huge piece of what pediatric OTs do, because that foundation of filling in the holes of, I can process my sensory world and know where my body is. I feel organized enough to interact appropriately with the people in my life and the objects in my surroundings. That's like the foundation. But that needs to be in place to go higher up, to have, I can sit and pay attention. I can have phonemic awareness and learn to read and listen to what the teacher is telling me, because my body is organized enough to do all of those things.
Yeah, it sounds so funny to say your body is organized and you're not connected to your body. But the more you talk, I think what you're really saying too is that this has to connect to this. Kind of my head has to connect to my body, and I have to have an understanding of it. And
Yeah.
when we spoke earlier, you gave me this example that I thought was very relatable. which is, when a child comes through a door and closes it, like slams the door, not intending to, but just unaware of how hard they're pushing on that door, or when they're, pressing down so hard on a paper with their pencil that they snap the tip of the pencil because they're just unaware of these things, long past an age when that would be understandable.
Mm-hmm. And the word we use for that is like your graded control. Like I know how to grade my movement. I know how hard to pet the dog or to
Mm.
hug my friends, or to put the toilet seat down or the big glass of water that I'm holding and I'm bringing it up. And,
Yeah,
some kids, then the parents are like, how many times do I have to tell you you're hurting the dog, you're hurting your friends. Why are you getting trouble at school for hitting your friends? And it's none of those things for some of these
right.
children.
Right. Would the tone of the voice, like there's some kids you say, now whisper, and they cannot
Mm.
whisper. They truly do
Voice,
not understand.
yeah,
Is that related as well?
hugely related. So the auditory system, and that's so tied to dyslexia as well. And so we look at the auditory system from like a processing perspective. When we think about, the range of sounds, we have a spectrum, a frequency of sound. So some kids are so sensory sensitive, they may be so heightened to like high frequency sounds, the the vacuum cleaner and all
How
of the
about how about
background
whistling? I noticed some kids really can't handle whistling, the sound.
that, because for some of these children it legitimately is so much louder.
Oh,
And but so there's a couple things. There's like the processing of sound. It's too loud, it's too soft. There's also another word that we use called modulation. There's the modulation of sound. I know how to, again, organize my tone of voice when I'm in the library and I need to talk like this, but now I'm outside playing with my friends. I'm going to call them. And some of us have those kids that their volume is just always up. They're not hearing it in the same way that we're hearing it. We
right.
say voice modulation. So I've got very targeted activities we do to help them recognize that differentiation.
Okay, that's so interesting, and I guess this is one of those things where, especially I think for older adults who never even heard of occupational therapy, never had a friend growing up who went to occupational therapy. It's very hard to relate. I think sometimes we perceive the world, and we think everybody perceives the world the way we perceive the world. But all children perceive the world differently than we do and
And
differently from each
adults,
other.
yeah.
Right. And so it's really helpful, I think, to be reminded of that. So that's awesome. Okay. So I had also written down a question for you, like kind of what is the focus of your OT practice?
I think, like what I discussed, the huge piece is helping parents understand the brain body connection. We think about the brain being the powerhouse and controlling everything. But really, when we're looking at those like 0 to 10 years of life, the body is what builds all those neural pathways in the brain. So, for example, if we're thinking about a child who's learning to write, you could think, oh, well, what I need to do is sit down and teach them the letters and write. But that's like the very last thing we're going to be doing in an OT practice, because we're looking at, well, do you have the core strength? In other words, your stomach and your back, are they strong enough to work for the muscles to engage to keep you seated in the chair first? And do you have the shoulder strength and stability we need core strength, shoulder strength, to have wrist strength and dexterity, and then to have finger dexterity. So we're looking at, going back to say, what are you focused on? We're focusing on building connection between the body and the brain. The goals, our ultimate goals, maybe we're focusing on the child's learning to stay seated in class. They're learning to write all their letters on the line. They're learning to be able to look up at the board and look back down and look up and down and organize. So the goals are, I can function in the environments and do the things I'm supposed to do. But the philosophies and the treatment practices are play and move to strengthen the body, to organize and coordinate the body, so that we build all those brain pathways to have the skills for all those other things. So that we talked about sensory integration. That's a big part of it. We have a lot of OT gyms have lots of different kinds of swings that provide movement in different ways so that we can target all the different parts of the building of that vestibular system, that movement system in the inner ear. And then we use another philosophy. For me, a huge philosophy is primitive reflex integration. When we think about a baby being born, they're born with a whole lot of reflexes. They suck, they swallow, they breathe, they start lifting their head up, they look, they roll. All of that at that very early age is reflexive. They're not consciously making a choice to do those things. Those are all of your primitive reflexes. What happens for a lot of our kids is I tell parents there's glitches. There's glitches for a number of reasons, which we may get to at a later stage, but that don't allow the reflexes to do their job as efficiently. So they linger for longer. What should happen is the reflexes support a process. It teaches the child to swallow. And then, well, I shouldn't use the reflex swallow, not that one. That's not a primitive reflex. That's just a natural reflex. Let's say just like grasping. A reflex teaches the child to grasp. It builds the hand strength and the muscle strength as it's going through the reflexive pattern. But then they get to an age where they're like, I want to pick up that toy and I want to release the toy. And we have the skill. And the more we use the skill, the reflex lays dormant in the system and it gets out of the way. But a lot of our kids who are struggling with challenges, a lot of them have lingering primitive reflexes. So we'll look at all those reflexes in the gym and notice, when you turn your head, your arms want to move still with your head, even though that should have stopped happening around 4 to 6 months.
Wow.
Well, now if you're a child that's sitting in class and you're holding a pencil and you're trying to write straight on the line and you look up to where the teacher is, your hand's going to slide down the page and you're going to write at an angle instead of on a straight line. So we look at all those little different reflexes and then do motor activities and provide families with activities to work on at home, because that's what's beautiful about child's brain is the adaptation and the ability for neuroplasticity, which means I can change the brain pathways. So we use the body to change the pathways of the brain.
Very cool. And I love that you talk about how you with a trained eye are going to see some things that the child is doing that I might see and I might not even realize that's different or that needs some work, but it's helpful to realize that. That's really interesting. Okay. Then that kind of leads me to another question, which is these kids have these glitches. Did kids always have glitches, or do you think kids are glitchier? Are
Isn't
kids
that
glitchier?
I wish we had the research. I think there's kind of so many different pieces of that. I'm sure we've always been glitchy. But we kind of have like a perfect storm, I feel, for children, the generations of today. We have in our environments aren't as clean and healthy. When we think about nutrition and the food and the pesticides and things that we're just being exposed to and can't really control that component of it. In the 90s, they implemented the back to sleep movement, and children were no longer allowed to sleep on their stomachs. I'm not telling families go ahead and put your babies on the tummy, but I'm telling you that has been, from a developmental perspective, very detrimental to the motor development of many of our children.
And that was
Because
related to SIDS, right?
that was related to SIDS and did decrease the rate of SIDS. But what it's also done is really shifted the natural development of children. Many children are skipping and missing crawling phases. And because going back to the sensory, when you're on your tummy, you're getting sensation to your tummy. And therefore you're getting, the brain is like, oh, what is this part of me? And then kids on their tummy push through their arms, and then they're looking up, and then they're strengthening. So tummy time is an enormous component of all the things that I talked about before in building that pyramidal strength, core strength, shoulder strength, and integrating a lot of the reflexes naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Children are spending a lot of time like this, and then they're on their back sleeping, and they're in the car seat, and they're in the stroller, and they're in the bumbo, and then there is like, so the combination of not sleeping on their backs as well as being in a lot of equipment, the body's not naturally getting the ability to feel gravity and to learn to resist it and move against it. And that's a huge component of is changing developmental milestones for a lot of our kids and just building their sensory systems. The other piece is, along with less development, and there's less play. Play is more sedentary. It's more
Like on a phone or an iPad or
phone and iPad, as well as children used to be allowed to go outside to play. We're just not in a safe place anymore where you can say, get outside, I'll call you for dinner. They've got to constantly be supervised. They can't constantly be supervised outside because mom has to be inside doing the laundry and making dinner. And so they're maybe contained in the playroom with these toys that are keeping them seated in this space.
Yeah.
And so just natural exploration has been limited. We can't be dirty. So it's like, don't go outside barefoot and don't touch the grass and don't touch that. And that's too dirty. And that was a huge part of building sensory awareness in the body. And then we have children who are having to sit and learn much younger before. So they're getting less in their bodies, but their demand on their brains is much higher at a much younger age.
So are you of the mind that we are asking kids to do things that they're not quite developmentally ready for?
Yep.
Yeah, in schools, in terms of like sitting still and listening and, you know.
And learning, like, kindergarten, even my son who's 17, when he started kindergarten at the public school was the learning till like noon, and then they got a nap till 1. And then there was the play kitchen and the dress up toys. And from 1 to 2, they played, which is huge learning. Play is learning.
Yeah.
That shortly after my son, maybe even during his kindergarten year, or shortly after that, they took away naps for that age group, and they took out the play kitchen. Not all schools, but I know that this is a generalization, but in general, there's a much higher expectation of sit and read this, do these math facts, learn these sight words, and play at home. Play is so important for learning.
And like you said, not just play, but play with other kids, because that's a different sort of play. And I'm sure the pandemic didn't do anything to help that as well.
It did a lot of damage.
Yeah. I
We're
mean,
seeing
even with young adults, there's not the same. It's not the same. Okay. What are some things that you do in your clinic, and how do these impact the child's performance at school? So, like if somebody comes to you and says, hey, my teacher says my child's having whatever handwriting problems, and I should maybe get some OT, and I don't even know what that is. And so that, like, where do you take it from there?
what does it look like?
Yeah, what
So
does it look like?
yeah, and so, well, first, from an evaluation perspective, we do a lot of we'll assess all of the reflexes, It's very simple and it's very concrete. You're putting a child in a position. For example, the asymmetric tonic neck reflex is one that's very closely tied to children who have dyslexia and auditory processing learning difficulties, because it's a reflex that when you turn your head, it makes your body do this when you're 4 to 6 months old. But over time, you want to be able to turn your head without your arms moving away from each other. The brain development of the reflex is that it's connecting the right and left hemispheres. So when we see a retained ATNR, we know that that child has some difficulty with bilateral coordination, meaning I can use both hands together, or I can stabilize my paper and reach across to the left-hand margin and write to the right and then come back to the left, because my body's not very well organized with both sides.
Right.
So we'll look at all the different reflexes, because they're all tied to some level of motor, emotional, and motor and emotional function. We'll look more at their sensory systems. A lot of that is parent rapport and a trained eye to watch the child during play, and also a subjective questioning about that child's day. And we'll look at their gross and fine motor skills, all the things like, can you crawl and jump and hop and gallop and skip and march with tapping your knees, and what does your writing look like, and what is your hand strength? So you kind of get a big picture of what does that foundation look like. And then we play, and the play just focuses on, when you gave the example of my child's not riding on the line. We know a child isn't riding on the line because they may be very weak in their core. And so we're doing a lot of strengthening activities, having them in swings in different positions, having them lay on the ground to do different activities. And we will work on shoulder strength and stability, and play games to work on their dexterity. From a sensory perspective, I don't know if you're hearing my dog snoring. Sensory perspective, but he is a freight train, and my auditory system was not tolerating that background noise. So from a sensory perspective, we are trying to train their sensory system. So for some children, it's gradually teaching them to feel comfortable to get on the moving equipment and to move faster and to stand and balance while it's swinging in different directions. For some children, it's slowing them down because they are just so fast all the time. So we're playing games where they're forced to learn how to calm their bodies. And for some children, it's multi-sensory processing. Like one game we play almost daily, we call Run and Crash, where we have a big crash pad and the child has to run across the gym and jump through the hoop and crash while I ask them a question. Depending on their age, the question may be, what does a dog say? And they've got to hear me. Now, this sounds very simple, but for a child who can't multi-sensory process, they're moving their body and looking ahead to figure out how to get their body jumping at the right time through the hoop, but also having to listen to what I'm saying and process that and come up with the answer and say it while they're moving.
Wow.
So some children may do it fine. Some children stop dead in their tracks, look, answer, then run. Some children keep running and then go, what? What did you say? So, and that gives you an idea of where the weaknesses are.
Does that tell me that it's not automatic? This whole running, jumping thing, it's just not happening in the background for their brains, and therefore they can't process what you're telling them auditorily because they're thinking too much about this. Is that kind of it?
It's absolutely. So like when you think about the development of the brain, the back of the brain is where all of the automaticity should be. I can stay seated in the chair and listen to the teacher and write the thoughts that are in my head, hold the thoughts in my head, organize it, think about the spelling of it, and get it all down, know how to motor, move my fingers around to formulate the letters and get it all down on paper. Well, if you've got a child who's sitting there that's body is not automatic, and the front of their brain that's thinking is saying, contract your stomach, stay seated, keep sitting. And then that's where some parents or teachers will report, I don't know what's wrong with this kid. Like he falls out the chair. Every day he's falling out the chair. Well, what the child is telling you is that he really started focusing on what he was doing. So his body couldn't focus on sitting anymore. So it fell down. The child's not conscious of it, but
Sure.
that's what's happening for a lot of these kids. And that's where what we didn't talk about, that's where the emotional regulation piece is such a huge part of it. Some of these kids are working so hard all day long, and they're misunderstood because they're being told, stop doing that. Don't do this. Why is this so hard for you? Why aren't you listening? Can't you just do that? And they're struggling to just keep up with themselves.
Yeah.
So children who had high resilience and are happy, motivated kids, it may not affect them as much. But a lot of our kids have low resilience, and
Hmm.
it affects them greatly. And then they're melting down. And then it becomes a behavioral problem when that's the behavior is the end result, but it's not the reason for why everything's happening.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it really is all just neural, and it's happening without us being able to see it. So um that's a good example. Thank you. Um so who comes to you? Like who should be getting an OT evaluation? Like what are some of the hallmarks um of kids who you get referred to you?
Yeah. So, in an ideal world, every pediatrician referred us their infants who were having problems with reflux and chronic ear infections, and we could nip it in the bud at a very young age. But generally, you're going to find that a lot of when I take a history in a lot of my kids, they were infants that had colic, sleep dysregulation, reflux, chronic ear infections. If we're lucky
Interesting.
enough to get them within those phases, that's great, and we can, strengthen them up even faster. That generally progresses into maybe a child who's when we have parents sometimes that are like, I say to parents, it shouldn't feel so hard all the time. Parenting is hard. It
Yeah.
is hard. And but we don't need to be in a battle with our kids all day long. So kids who struggle with transitions, they won't put their shoes on, get in the car, get out the car, leave the park, come to the park, and you find that you're having to negotiate or work around. Like transitions is a big piece of it. Um,
Stop,
and then
stop there for a second. I want to
yeah,
explore that more. Why is transitions hard? Is it because they've become comfortable in this one space and now you're asking them to undo that and go do a whole nother space? Is that kind of why it's hard? Like,
that's yes, that is a big piece of it. And a transition incorporates so many different multi-sensory facets, like having to shifting gears is very hard for the brain to have to just stop what you're doing, even when you had a plan and you were in that plan, and have to be pulled out of that plan and then thrown into a new plan. It's dysregulating for sensory kids. And they don't, as adults, we see everything in our mind's eye. If I say you know that we're going to get off this call and then you're going to run to Target quickly because you forgot you had to do, like, you can see all of that in your head. A
mhm,
lot of our kids, they're just so in the here and now, and when they have no sense of time
mhm.
and space. So when we say, oh, we're going to go do this, we may think that they understand all of that, but they really don't. And it
Yeah.
feels very uncomfortable to have to do that gear shifting. And
Mm.
also, depending on the demand that we have, what we're asking them, we may not recognize that that child can't explain to us, when you're putting me in the car seat, the straps are so uncomfortable on my body and my back gets sweaty and it's hot and I get thirsty. But I don't know to tell you all of these things. I'm just going to argue with you about getting in the car.
Mm. Okay, so along the lines of that, you just triggered a memory for me. So many children have this problem where tags bother
Yeah.
them. The tag in the back of their shirt or whatever. And is that so that's all related as well, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the back of the brain, not what our brain is supposed to be efficient. It's supposed to ignore as much as possible and only highlight the important stuff. But if that back of the brain is not the part of the brain that's supposed to do that is called the reticular activating system, its constant job is like sending information up to the brain to say, this is important, pay attention, and or to not send it up and be like, make a decision like this isn't relevant. Well, the tag is being too relevant to them. They're not managing to put it into the background, to ignore it.
And do they then kind of like obsess on that and they can't get it in the background?
Yeah, they can't get it in the background. And then, yeah,
Yeah.
that,
That's interesting, but you can then help to train them to do that.
I think we have to recognize that we all have a profile. Excuse me one second. I'm just going to take a sip of water. We're all going to have, no one's going to have a perfect sensory system. And we're going to have parents who have certain issues, for lack of a better word. And
we all have issues, right?
yeah, we all have a range. So me, for example, I'm a very sensory sensitive person, and I, to this day, cut the tags out of most of my shirts because my body just doesn't want to ignore it. But the goal, so you're not going to expect to make every child tolerate every sensory experience. But the goal is we can be aware of it and recognize it. And I, as an adult, can go out and be like, oh gosh, I forgot to cut this tag out. That's going to drive me crazy. But you can still have a conversation, go have fun, and then go home and take off your shirt and remember to cut the tag off for next time. Versus the child that is raging and melting down in public and can't move past the experience. So I think the purpose is to work toward function, not perfection.
Yeah. And also the child who's melting down, but maybe can't articulate. What's really driving me crazy is this tag back here.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because kids aren't good at that. They're not good at saying, Mom, here's what I'm really thinking today.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's just not how children work. They act out these things.
Yeah.
So like I remember in the school where I used to teach, one of the referrals would be like shoe tying, kids who can't tie their shoes. Is that the kind of person who gets sent to you?
Yes, so there's going to be anything like related to fine motor skills or visual perceptual visual motor skills, which is a lot like shoe tying, writing, and um, zipping up your coat, and
Mm. Buttons.
opening up struggling to open up the snack bags at an age that everyone else in the class seems to be able to. I think those are the very like more concrete, simple things. I think the ones that get missed are the children who seem like they're just a bad kid. No child is, okay, maybe 1%, but I tell parents 99% of the time, no child wants to be bad.
Right,
And
exactly.
there's an underlying reason. So I think a lot of referrals are missed because parents or teachers think like, no, that's just their personality, or they're just trying to get attention, or they just enjoy being bad. So I think any children who seem to be struggling in an environment, seeming to be emotionally unstable or dysregulated, or the parent feels like, I just know there's more here for my kid and they're not seeming to maximize their potential. Like I'd love for OT to be seen as something that's more like the gym or healthy eating. I think a lot of parents struggle to commit to, I need to go do this, because then they're questioning, what have I done wrong as a parent? And none of it is something you or the child have done wrong. It's just more that this is such a lovely avenue to support your understanding of your child and help with the dynamic and relationship between all family members. Because when you can understand the reason the child is struggling and find a support for it, then it's going to change that relationship between all of you.
Right, right. We talked earlier, when My daughter, you never knew when she was coming to hug you if it was going to be a soft hug or you're going to have a bruise.
Yeah.
And so that understanding that that is because, she's struggling with some of this sensory perception, that is very helpful. It allows a parent to empathize instead of correcting necessarily.
Yeah.
Something,
Another thing we didn't talk about, which, because speech is so much more concrete. So a lot of families in the 0 to 3 ages will immediately go to speech therapists because their child's not talking.
mm,
And there's an enormous connection, the one part of the brain called the cerebellum, when you start it, when you start giving movement to a child's body, it allows speech to flourish and expand. I've got so many examples of kids that came to me. One little guy that comes to mind, he was 3.5 and came for behavioral issues, but he just really didn't say much at all. He spoke in 2-word sentences at 3.5 years old. And I thought that the child had a significant speech language impairment. And the parents were very diligent about doing the activities at home. We got him moving. And within a month, the child was talking in full. Now, this isn't always typical, but for this particular child, what he needed was connection to his body and feel like, oh, here I am. And he actually had all of this language in him. It just all like, bleh, like just came out. And then he'd be like, come in literally a month later and was like, Miss Janine, did you know that a pterodactyl is a blah, 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 blah? And I'm like, who is this child? So when there's speech concerns, I think having an OT partnering along would be really
right,
great too.
right. Because it's all that's neural network that's all working together.
Yeah, then that brings another thing to mind, like when you ask, well, who goes to, when you think from an auditory perspective, your kids that are often like, what? You say something like, what? Even though then they'll be like, oh yeah, da, 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 but they don't seem to hear you, they don't seem to listen. Parents will say they just don't listen to me. Well, are they not listening or are they not able to process what you're saying to them?
And if they're not able to process it, why? Like what's going on that's preventing them from doing that?
So there could be a number of things, but um, that multi-sensory processing, it's like I can only listen, but mostly you're talking to me when I'm sitting engaged with the toy or I'm looking at the TV or I'm like visually engaged in something. I would say to teachers all the time, because people are they'll be like, look at me when I talk to you, or look at the front of, a child sitting in class and they're looking like kids would maybe do this a lot, like turn their ear and like look down, and the teacher's like, you need to look at me while I'm talking to you. And I've shared in the past with parents and teachers, for this particular child, which do you want? Do you want them to look or do you want them to listen? Because right now, both those things are not happening at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah.
When the visual system's on, the auditory system may shut down.
And it's so interesting that the teacher might be perceiving that as rude and therefore, feeling like they need to correct something that they don't really need to correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have a question for you.
Mm.
Uh, one question that came in upon registration was about books. Are there any books that you can think of that might be helpful to parents or teachers that have to do with occupational therapy or any of these topics?
Well, I think that there's some popular books. A lot of the OT stuff relates to well, I need help from an emotional sensory processing component. So some of the most popular ones that have been around for a very long time, The Out of Sync Child by Carol Kranovitz, Carol with a C, Kranovitz with a K. Lucy Miller is a big OT that has a book called The Sensational Child. And I think if you start looking at those two from a sensory perspective, they will pull up some other more modern, newer ones that may be helpful as well.
Okay.
I really like Beyond Behaviors by Mona Delahouque. She's
Okay.
newer around, and then Dan Siegel writes a lot of great books, The Whole Brain Child, and some other behavioral. In terms of like OT activities, there's lots of OT activity books. You mentioned in the beginning on my bio, like bridging the gap for families. Like this has been a passion of mine for a long time. And so, there's lots of people out there that may have webinars and, we say books, but a lot now is podcasts and webinars. And so, my body and brain parenting is that it's also like, let's look at the whys, and here's some activities we can start doing to strengthen all of these, what's going on with your kiddo.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Another question that came in just while we've been talking is a really good one. Like, are there any tips that you would give to classroom teachers that they could do with their whole class that will help at all? Perhaps help
So
every,
many.
so many.
I think for, if you're a teacher in a classroom that, and classes are so much better right now, but alternative seating and understanding that some children's bodies need different positions and need to move. They may be like wiggling on a move and sit cushion, or on a wobble seat, or on a bouncy ball, or with the TheraBand, what's called a bouncy band, I think,
Where they rest
that
their feet on it.
on the chair. Like movement often facilitates focus, allowing fidgets in the class and teaching children like these are the rules and the way we use the fidgets. If we don't follow the rules, we don't get the fidgets. So you can put, because a lot of teachers are like, it distracts them. And
Mhm.
my whole thing is, I feel like if you introduce the fidgets and the alternative seating with a rule chart and parameters and boundaries around how and why they're used,
Yeah.
children are brilliant at knowing what they need, and they will follow those rules, I feel. So
Yeah.
those kind of things are great. Allowing tummy time, like in circle time, having all the kids on their stomachs to really
Hmm.
work on strengthening their bodies, and while they're listening to the stories, and having movement breaks, which has become so much more popular now, which is great. But like, there's all those different websites that allow for targeted movement. I would look at anything that relates to yoga, or anything that relates to bilateral, like marching in place whilst tapping your hand to your opposite knee, you're crossing over your body, or anything with rhythm, like watching something and having to follow rhythm. Those are really good places to start.
So this crossing the midline, that's good somehow. I don't really get it, but I understand it's good.
So you have your brain. In a child's brain, we actually have two separate brains. We have a right brain and a left brain. And you have this bridge called the corpus callosum that is small when a child is born. And the more you use both sides of your body together and cross over, the more you teach that bridge builds pathways and gets thicker and stronger, and connects the right and left brains for us to be more whole brained. A lot of our kids are walking around really in two little bodies. There's a right side and a left side, and they don't actually know that they belong to each other
Hmm.
until they're a little old, until they start engaging in that midline crossing. So you'll notice a lot of kids, like if they're writing and they don't come over to the left-hand margin and things seem to be all in the middle of the page, or they don't get a hand dominance, they um they'll switch. It's like if you're going to hand them something on their right, they'll grab it with their right. If you hand it to them on the left, they grab it with their left instead of using their dominant hand to cross over. Those are all
Mm,
little clues that the brain is not efficiently talking right and left together.
right. Okay. All right, that's helpful. Gosh, this is so much information and it's so specialized, and it's not what your average parent or your average teacher is thinking about and focused on. So it's really helpful to realize that there's these other senses that kids that we're all using, but that are maybe a little underdeveloped in kids. So
Or
really,
overdeveloped.
Or over, right, right. But I love this word dysregulated, like it's just things are not, something is wrong. We're not regulating all of it, working with our whole brain. So, this is very helpful. I don't have any other questions, that have come through, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you. And I'm getting some love over the chat here saying thank you. This is so helpful and
I'm so
enlightening.
glad. Happy
Yeah.
to support.
Okay. I know the beach that is behind you has a lot to do with your accent, that it's coming from Cape Town in South Africa. So
Even
that
though I'm
looks
sitting in Atlanta, Georgia, but yes.
that looks like a lovely place to be.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Behind me is Maine, so we're kind of all over the map, aren't we?
Ah.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we will enjoy this recording in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. Happy
Okay.
to be here.
Bye.
Bye.